What's up, Zox fam? Now, does Wuthering Waves succeed where Zenless fails? I'm actually really intrigued to see what XGO Solo has to say about this. Again, shout out to the homie Katarina Nokami for sending this to me so we can get into it. But let's go ahead and let's weigh in.
All right, little Jimmy, I need you to pull up a chair and get in close, because I'm going to do what your father never did and have a nice one-on-one conversation with you. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to talk to you about last week's report card. Instead, I want to discuss something that I am unbelievably hyped for, and that is Wuthering Waves. Now, anybody who's familiar with me is probably familiar with how I often operate in regards to a new gacha release. Quite frankly, I usually don't care, because the fact of the matter is, once this new gacha comes out, it's going to be overhyped. Everybody's going to be talking about it for approximately 15 seconds, and then it's just going to die. It happened with Reverse 1999, it happened with Tower of Fantasy, and I assure you there are going to be 14 or 15 more gacha games in the next 2 years with the exact same thing.
Now, I want to bring up this point. Reverse 1999, I feel like is a more niche game. So it definitely is a game in its own right, is successful in my opinion, but it catered to a much nicher audience. Now, also too with Tower of Fantasy. Tower of Fantasy had the chance to be a massive game. They just absolutely tanked it when it came down to the release. And then even from there on, when they had the opportunity to fix certain things, it just took them way too long. So it wasn't that they were just these overhyped games. I feel like it wasn't necessarily that. I do feel like, though, that those games definitely had the potential. They either one of two things, cater to a niche audience, or just completely failed altogether in Tower of Fantasy's case, right? So I will say the hype was justified and rightfully so was there, but they themselves didn't meet the expectations. So I think more clarity on that point is kind of important, because it was really that, right? They were the ones themselves, like I said, either catering to a much nicher audience within an already niche space on being on a mobile game. And then like with TOF, just not hitting the mark, man. It's just that simple.
Happens. History has a habit of repeating itself, and Doom is often the only thing in the future of many of these games, because the fact of the matter is, if there's not a player base, then there's not a market for it to exist in. But for the first time in quite a while, I am actually looking at a gacha game that I am not only genuinely excited for, but fully willing to look past the entire gacha system before the game even comes out. For those who don't know, I had
that's all of us right now.
Star Rail before the game came out, because I thought the game looked relatively interesting. However, when I saw the gacha mechanics, I decided I wasn't going to play it, and the only reason I ever did was because somebody talked about it. But with Wuthering Waves, what I'm looking at in this game is so unimaginably promising that not only am I excited for it, but I'm actually doing a solo first and coming out to discuss a game that's not even available. I don't think...
this is like one of the big things I think that we're all kind of seeing, like why you're probably even seeing my content. Like it is one of those things where, like, I will say I feel like Wuthering is doing a first for a lot of people, right? And this is just all in relevance to, like I said, the presentation and what they're bringing. I honestly feel like they're kind of like the light bringers in this situation, with bringing a new beacon of hope. I feel like Kuro is the perfect company to be executing this because of their previous track record. This is only looking all in favor for them with just how they're making players feel, the types of content you guys are going to be seeing, you're even seeing now. And I think that with that, right, this is 100% a game that definitely has so much hype behind it. And the game is, again, only been tested. It's only been beta tested. And we haven't even gotten to CBT2 to actually see some of the newer things that they've done yet. So it's already looking super, super promising, dude. So, I mean, honestly, I agree with that.
Hype is an accurate way to describe just how excited I am to play this game, and I am praying that they actually let me in the second beta. Now, for those who are unaware why I'm looking forward to this game so much, it's really quite simple. You guys remember Zenless Zone Zero? For those who aren't entirely aware, when I saw the trailer for that game, I was so unimaginably excited, because what I thought I was looking at was a game that heavily focused on combat, parries, timing, and actually had a skill ceiling. What's missing in a lot of gacha games is something that people joke about. It's skill. You know, you get into the MLC, you make it to the end, and people go like, oh, you can't beat it, it's a skill issue, but in actuality, it's not. The fact of the matter is, Honkai Star Rail, Genshin, and most other gacha games are unimaginably casual experiences, and the only thing stopping you from clearing in-game content is how lucky and or how much time you have invested.
I think that that's one of the valid points that we were kind of going over in Gacha Smack's video, was that Wuthering Waves has the opportunity to fill a need for those those of you guys that do enjoy Genshin, that do enjoy Honkai Star Rail, that are a little bit more sweaty than some other players. This is going to give you an opportunity for you to enjoy a game that's going to allow you to be able to test those like limitations of how good you actually are while seeming to still cater to the audience that might want to pick the game up that's casual. I think that that's also the biggest thing too, is that the marketing right now and what we're even hyping up is that difficulty, that ceiling, right? That skill level. But it doesn't mean that they're not going to have aspects to the game that allows a casual to be able to come into the game and still have just as much fun. And there's a lot of different things, different types of units, different parameters that could be set. So, just kind of considering these things, I feel like that's why Kiro has a really, really high chance of being successful at this point. Because again, when we're looking at, even if they were to say to just implement just high level, combat, that's something that they can always come back in later and say like, hey, like after this many tries, we can lower the parameters and you can decide to turn that on or off, right? So there's a lot of different ways that they can go about making content more accessible to those more casual players. But I really, truly do feel like the content is more catered to those that are looking for an opportunity to have some really high skill level content. And I would even argue in-game content, right? So that's going to be my take on that.
There's absolutely zero skill ceiling beyond putting the right people on the right team and getting lucky with getting those people. It is really fucking annoying to know that your only course of action when you hit a wall is to go back to the drawing board, get some materials, and come back once you can actually win the war of attrition. That is an issue that plagues a lot of games, including Star Rail, and while yes, you could argue it is to a lesser extent, the problem is still there. But what Zenless Zone Zero looked like, at least to me, somebody who wasn't able to play it, was it looked like a game that would be hyper-fixated on combat. And sure, while the boss fight may have taken you the better part of your late 40s to finish, you would have technically been able to get out on the other side so long as you were good enough at dodging, parrying, and the works. However, when the second closed beta actually came out and we finally got to see what the game looked like, it was nothing but TVs for 70% of the core gameplay experience. Yay. To say that
I'm not gonna lie, guys, like it really was. So I did get lucky enough. I don't even know if it really could be called lucky, but I did get lucky enough to get into the Zenless Zone Zero beta test. I actually have a video up on this channel. I was so disappointed that I only did one stream. That's bad. Like an entire beta, I only did one stream. It wasn't even that much for me to go off of to where like I wanted to continue to stream it. It was literally this TV mode. And I don't think that like the gameplay itself was bad. It was the traversing or the game mode that it just put you in. You were in that literally, like you said, 70% of the time. And so I feel like that's one of those things where I'm going to say this. Currently where Zenless is, and this is as a person that is still very much so looking forward to seeing what they do with Zenless, I don't feel like they have a seat at this table. I'm just going to say that with as much kindness and being as genuinely and just as honest as I possibly can. I do not think they have a seat at this table just because of the fact that for what they delivered from their betas, right? We're not comparing actual releases. Just from their betas alone, it doesn't even remotely compare to what we're seeing with Wuthering Waves. I think it's also safe to say, too, that the way the games are being presented is also as different types of games. But again, when you're like talking about Titan companies or like really massive games that could potentially have really massive audiences, there is going to be that natural comparison, and just purely based off of that, they just don't really sit with each other. Like, for example, Zenless is like right here, Wuthering Waves. It's like somewhere over here, you're probably even you're just gonna see arm, right? Like that's just literally how that situation is from my perspective,
Was disappointing would be a monumental understatement that rivals the grandiose structure of Mount Rushmore. The very moment that closed beta was out for the week-long mark and reviews started rolling in, the ZZZ channel in my server went from people being excited about the game to just literally pages of the sleeping emote. There wasn't a damn soul who's actually hyped for this game. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem like Hoyoverse is actually going to go back to the drawing board and get rid of this dog shit. When this game was advertised, I thought it was going to be combat. I really, really, really wanted it to be combat because I want to have a game that I don't have to play casually. For all of the shit that I give Fortnite, at the end of the day, the reason I can appreciate that game to the level which I do is because of the skill ceiling with the building. And while yes, the community is more toxic than Chernobyl, that only makes it all the more satisfying when I eradicate some 5-year-old's progress for the last 20 minutes in one shot. The gratification you get from playing a game long enough to actually be considered good is unparalleled. Being praised by your fellow gamer not because you rolled the best stats, but because guess what? You're actually skilled enough is something that people often take for granted.
Yeah,
and it
that's
is
true.
something that is severely lacking in the gacha scene.
Yeah, 100%. I think in mobile gaming, we have definitely strayed away from actually the term get good. Like now when people say get good, they're talking about spending more money. like bro, like that's just not even okay. Like, and the thing is though, that has come from gacha culture. And I will say that like one of the biggest things that for me this year is putting my time into something that is really going to be giving that love and that value and showing me that they value my time and or my money. And I just feel like, again, with the quality of where these games are, you know, going, and like I said, just even to be able to maintain or even play these games, they should be offering experiences and the capability or accessibility to be able to have those things where you're able to say like, hey man, I'm one of, say, you know, 1,000 people that cleared this because of the difficulty ceiling. But I mean, granted, that's like probably like a very, very super intense thing that would come much later into the game's lifespan. But just that kind of content is what we kind of grew up off of. If you're in a certain age bracket, was like, oh man, you beat that game. Like that's how it was. Now it's just more so how much money can you spend, or really how lucky can you get on rolling gear. I agree with that.
Until now.
Oh my god, the combat and Wuthering is so sweet.
Wuthering Waves is basically going to be hardcore Genshin Impact. We are talking a open world where it's basically just a Souls-like / Monster Hunter. It's heavily emphasized on combat, and if you don't get good, your ass is gonna get smeared across the floor like a fucking mop. And buddy, I'm waiting for it. I really am, because as a masochist, there is nothing that brings me more joy than having people beat me up. It's such an exciting time to be a gacha player, because when I say that I can actually wholeheartedly recommend this game to friends, I'm not joking. If this game ends up playing like how I expected to, it would actually be entirely possible and plausible for you to have a level 1 character and just obliterate late game bosses, assuming you're good enough at dodging.
If you're good at enough,
additionally, if it ends up working how we think it's gonna work, that would mean it does not matter how bad your character is. If you like them enough, you can use them. So long as they're a designated DPS, you can, in theory, take out an entire boss with only the character that you like, no matter what the meta says, if you as a player are actually skilled enough.
I think that would be sick.
That entirely eradicates one of the biggest problems with Genshin. You have these characters you get attached to, they come out, and then they're hot garbage. Looking at you, Dea. And I know that I'm harping on like that skill ceiling fact a lot, but just like look at this gameplay. These people are like dodging left, right, they're parrying, they're avoiding these attacks. It just looks cool. By far, one of my favorite moments in the trailer is when we see this guy. This guy will end up being my main, and no, it's not because he's a twink. Just look at this guy's fighting style.
Okay.
He's zipping around the entire battlefield, punching 1,000.
I'm not gonna lie, guys. These are valid points here, right? And I think that that's the part about what's making Wuthering Waves so much more appealing than a lot of the other games that we've seen. Is that seems to be an opportunity for us to be able to experience a level of gameplay that's going to really open up so much more, even in terms of content, right? Like being able to see level 1 clears, dude, is going to be insane. So taking like the worst character in the game and then saying like, hey, I'm going to do a level 1 clear with this unit on the hardest or one of the hardest bosses in the game, or, a boss that has all of these different mechanics. So it's like, obviously there's like things such as attribute advantage to disadvantage, but I think that would even be cool to see is like, okay, let me take this level 1 character with disadvantage and still be able to win just because I understand the boss mechanics and I'm able to dodge, I'm able to parry. There's all these different things that I can do. So it's not really required for me to follow these hard set in stone metas. Now, does that mean that people are going to not follow those metas? No. People are still going to 100% follow those metas. Some of the higher tracking videos are probably going to be about those metas. So the thing is that it's just opening up the other aspect or other side of the community to want to be a part of everything. So it, again, still going to have its aspects that is going to cater to spenders, to, you know, the whales, the leviathans, the dolphins, the casuals. There's going to be a lot of aspects I feel like that cater to them. But then for the masochists, I think that there's going to be that level 1 content that we're going to start seeing too, which would be really, really insane.
Times a second, probably hitting like a wet napkin, but it doesn't matter because he's hitting so fast. Then he activates this ultimate, he throws down a pylon, probably is getting some sort of stat buff based on this image, and then is just
that's
enemy
wow, I didn't even notice that the first time.
And ending it with a kick flip. This looks really, really, really fun to play, and the best part about it, it is a open world. And not only is it an open world, but it's also an open world set in the apocalypse setting. Starting to sound familiar? For those of you who don't remember, Tower of Fantasy was like the first big gacha game I played. Before that, it was AFK Arena, then it was Skullgirls Mobile and Mega Man X Dive, but Tower of Fantasy was the very first like really big one I played. And the reason I went out of my way to play Tower of Fantasy was because I heard it was set in a sort of apocalyptic setting, and I am a massive sucker for those settings. But one of my biggest gripes with the game was, despite being in an apocalypse, it does not feel like it. The colors, for example, were way too oversaturated. There was absolutely nothing about the game that told me, yep, this is an apocalypse, besides the occasional demonic entity. This game doesn't have...
And I feel like that's like one of the big things to even them enhancing the games, still keeping that apocalyptic feel to the game, with something that's like, I don't think it's given enough credit. That's not an easy thing to be able to accomplish without going too much to the left or not enough, right? So that's one of the things that I think that with the revamping of the game, it gave a certain life to a lifeless situation. So it wasn't too much, but it was just enough to make it visually more appealing to the eye, and I think just overall for the experience. So I think that's a valid point to make as well.
Have that problem, because not only is it set in the apocalypse, but the colors and aesthetic actually matches it. When you look at this gameplay footage, you're not thinking, oh my god, what's over that hill? It's so whimsical. You're thinking, damn. What the fuck happened here?
Yeah, that's the feeling you want.
What's going on? What's the grander story here? And while we're talking about grander story, let's talk about these devs' commitments to telling a good one. After the backlash on the story in the old update, these guys went back to the drawing board and just revamped everything. They actually said, you know what? This is dog shit. Let's fix it. And what that tells me alone is that this game is worth playing. Because the devs are actually listening to the players for once. They're not busy counting all the money they made on, I don't know, fucking Amber's 5-star banner. I don't care. They are sitting there listening to what people are saying, taking it into account, and instead 100%. Of being butthurt because people don't like what they're doing, they're going, yeah, you know what? Maybe this does suck. They're going back to the drawing board and they are fixing it. It is wild to me that this is something I actually have to praise somebody for. But
yeah, that is that is valid though. I mean, honestly though, that's like one of the things of why we're acting the way we're acting. I think that Kiro doesn't maybe not even realize it, but what they basically did for us as a community was they made us feel like we're big time already, right? And I think that that's kind of one of the things that, like, what he's saying here is like, it's unbelievable that I have to actually praise somebody for this or a company for this. And it's like, dude, they're doing the big boy stuff right now. Like, you being able to have the humility to say, and again, that all is what this goes back to. Companies have strayed so far away from having forms of humility that they don't care if their project or the work that they put in is actually good anymore. And I think that that's one of the things that we're kind of seeing with even with Zenless. Like, they seem to be wanting to release it as is. And I think a lot of that is coming from the fact that Hoyo just truly believes that we can just release whatever we want and people are going to like it because it's us. And I think that that's, again, not the metric that you want to continue with. People are going to remember that, right? From years to come, they're going to remember like, oh man, they started out great, but then everything else that they released afterwards was just super lazy and didn't really have the care that it should have. Whereas I feel like with Kiro Games, every game that comes out, it's getting better and better and better. So that for me is what we call a better player experience. And that's how you maintain fans from game to game to game. Because the thing is that, do I think that people are going to just stop playing Punishing Gray Raven because Wuthering Waves is coming out? Maybe if they don't have enough time, but they're not going to ever not play it because they're going to want to go revisit it just to see what the newest construct is, or to get that new construct, try out their gameplay. And at this point, man, I'm just praying to God we get a Punishing Gray Raven crossover with Wuthering Waves. That's just going to be absolutely insane. And I'll probably have a video coming on that. But either way, that's going to be a huge thing, though, to consider. Is that what is this company doing? And they're really just doing something that players just simply have asked for. I feel like in every community, they're just delivering on it.
But it genuinely does feel like you're screaming into a void more often than not when it comes to these gaming companies. And yet,
100%.
here is somebody who's actually having the first closed beta, taking what they hear from it, making a second closed beta that addresses those issues, and chances are the issues that we have with its second closed beta are also going to be addressed. The game already is really fucking good looking, and while a lot of us don't have access to the closed beta too, I have no doubt that whatever we complain about will actually be talked about, listened to, and fixed. This game is not going to be a Genshin killer. Allow me to go ahead and say that now. In fact,
agree.
I don't think
100%.
that this game is going to have as many views as Tower Fantasy did on launch either. But what I do think is that this game is worth your time. And if you want a Genshin adjacent experience that actually has some sort of advanced combat that's going to deliver on something Zenless Zone Zero didn't, this, my friend, is your savior. If I get access to this closed beta, I will be dedicating myself entirely to answering any question you guys may have. I will also be thoroughly dissecting its gameplay. I will be airing out my criticisms, my compliments, and all of it without any sort of discrimination.
Now, I will say one thing to what Solo said prior to is like how massive this game is going to be. I'm not going to lie. I feel like this game is going to have a pretty solid release. But I think that things can obviously change from now to CBT2. We have no idea. And I honestly firmly believe that what's going to happen is just simply word of mouth. If you have more people going out and saying like, wow, that CBT2 was amazing, or even with the flaws there, we already know they're going to be changing it. The more hype that's built up upon this, the more people we're going to see at the release. They're going to check it out. Even if they don't stay long term, is going to be absolutely insane. So I'm honestly looking forward to what Wuthering is going to be doing. Again, guys, definitely a really solid take from Solo here. We are going to be streaming on the twitch.tv/Zoxaskun, doing some more reactions. We're going to be checking out Punishing Gray Raven for those of you guys that have not seen Punishing Gray Raven yet. So you can kind of get an idea of the types of things that Kiro likes to cook up. So yeah, guys, that's going to be that. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Do you agree like Wuthering Waves is absolutely crushing and succeeding where Zenless fails? Because I got to say, I 100% think so. So that's going to be that. I'll catch you guys in the next one.